Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched 1993's Falling Down. This is a film directed by Joel Schumacher, who has a bit of a mixed bag of a career and a reputation. But this is a pretty decent film. Definitely worth watching. And one that I've been meaning to watch for a while, but for one reason or another, I mean, that's the whole point of this series, right? For one reason or another, or just, procrastinating forever, I never got around to watching it. Couldn't tell you when I originally heard about this film or why, but I was thinking about it again for a couple of reasons. One of which was last week I watched, at the behest of my friend Spencer, I watched About Schmidt, which is a hell of a film that I'm not going to talk about. But it got me thinking about films that are for films of a certain kind, and that is not to say that there is a strong connection between this one and that one, but I had it in mind it brought this one to mind. So that's mainly why I bumped it up in my list. This film has not a star-studded cast, but has, I guess, at least two big names to it. Those being Michael Douglas and Robert Duvall. And this film is an interesting film that's hard to describe, especially if I'm trying to avoid spoiling the plot or anything like that. I'm going to do my best not to, but yeah, anyway. So the zero spoiler summary is, the summary of the film is basically a man walks across LA and has a bad day. And that's, I think, if that hooks you in, great. And if it doesn't, it won't. I guess you've got the cover of the poster for the film on the screen as well. So you can judge it by that, judge it by its cover, like everyone says to do. Anyway, it's a fascinating film that does a bunch of things right and a bunch of things okay. It doesn't have a really extraordinary plot. It's not, incredibly gripping. It doesn't have amazing dialogue or the greatest cinematography or anything like that. But generally speaking of Joel Schumacher's works, I've tended to think that he does a pretty reasonable job, at least as a director or as a as in the cinematography that he directs. Although I don't know the relationship he has with cinematographer or cinematographers that he works with. Nonetheless, one thing that's really notable about this is I think the setting, because it is set in LA in the 90s in the middle of the summer. And I think that's something that could be potentially be hard to capture. But there is both a practical thing and a technical thing that I really appreciated about this, which is one, they clearly filmed this in LA. There are some not like super notable locations, but locations that are notable enough or like just visuals that are specific enough to LA that they couldn't have shot it anywhere else. So that was appreciated from a practical standpoint of they didn't just, do this on sets or, in Vancouver where they shoot everything. They actually shot this in LA. The other thing is the feeling of the heat of a Southern California summer, which I think is something not specifically for that, but like getting a climate through in film, I think can be very difficult, or is at least very often not done very well. But in subtle but very well done ways this film really gets across the this this specifically Southern California, like, unrelenting sort of heat. Um, but it also, I mean, there's also something about the, in conjunction with the culture of LA, and the, the surroundings and what the experiences are. And so subtle color grading, use of either film effects or just like letting the radiant heat effects stay more visible with the way they do their filming. Having people sweat and adjust themselves. That's partial, in no small part, the actors, right? But having the actors, visibly show their discomfort or how they're, reacting to the different environments, indoors, outdoors, wherever they happen to be. So that's something I really appreciated, that they did really well. As far as the characters go, I mean, uh, Michael Douglas does a great job. Robert Duvall does a fine job. I'm not the biggest Robert Duvall fan, but he is a notable name. Um, and a variety of other cast members are generally pretty good. Generally believable characters. Some of them a little bit exaggerated, overhyped. Inflated a little bit, but for made it's used to good effect. As far as other movies I was thinking about as I watched this, there were two, some for reasons I've already mentioned, like the atmosphere. But there's two movies I was thinking about a lot as I was watching this. And again, don't read too much into this. I'm not like giving you away the plot or anything like that by telling you these are the two films. But two movies I was thinking about, which are also movies I would recommend seeing if you haven't. One was Taxi Driver, and the other one is Do the Right Thing. I am going to talk about Do the Right Thing just a little bit in conjunction with this. So one of the things I really appreciated I thought this film did well was talk in a not so subtle but still not ham-fisted way, address a lot of social issues, social and economic issues. And it's not, doing some nuanced analysis or anything like that. It's more of a social critique more than anything else. It doesn't have anything incredibly insightful or smart to say, but it's painting a picture of a place at a time, and I think it does that with, it's an interesting perspective. There are some interesting parallels, and again, don't read too much into this. There's some interesting parallels between this film and Do the Right Thing. Do the Right Thing is an incredible film that I think everybody should see. And seeing how this film is in some ways a mirror image, both, with parallel threads, parallel, a sort of a parallel environment. Do the Right Thing being, New York in the 80s, but also strong juxtapositions where they also present very opposite views, very opposite ways to address the same things. There's a lot of interesting comparisons there, and it's been a few years since I've seen Do the Right Thing, so it's actually prompted me to go back and probably watch it again. But anyway, that was just a comparison I had in my mind. I wonder if anybody, well, I should look and see if anybody else has written anything comparing the two. Yeah, I guess the two were only filmed. Do the Right Thing was 88 or 89, I think, and this is 93. Um, and I would say Do the Right Thing is the better film. But anyway, I digress. I'm starting to talk about that movie instead. Um, as far as what the film doesn't do so well, let's not jump straight into that. I'll sort of ease into it. A lot of the scenes in this film are uh, fantastic. Probably going to stick with me for a long time for one reason or another. Just sort of fascinating events or fascinating ways of shooting, homages to other films, those sorts of things. The opening of the film, the first scene, is just kind of fantastic. I think it's an homage to Eight and a Half. It goes a different way. It's just a fascinating scene. There are other scenes that are great in their own right. Events that like go from being this could be a normal thing to this is slightly off to this went kind of wild, and but it's done with enough like dexterity, enough care that you're not like, oh, suddenly this got weird. You sort of realize when you're well into the scene that you're like, how did we get here? And I think I really appreciate how well that was often done. What I didn't like so much is that the overarching plot can be a little bit ham-fisted, tropey, a little bit boring. Towards the end of the film, it seems to feel like it needs a certain kind of closure that I don't particularly agree with and would have liked to see it go another way. But is interesting in its own right. And it leaves a lot of things sort of open in a way that lets you consider them for yourself. And I appreciate that. I can appreciate a film that doesn't, feel compelled to close up every plot line, that lets you, be introduced to something when it's already in motion and then not bring it to a conclusion by the end. And not, and I mean that not just for sequel bait, because that shit annoys me. Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating film that, I don't want to say why you should or shouldn't watch it. It's a decent film that I enjoyed. There are better ones out there. There are worse ones out there. Wow, what an insightful. Anyway, yeah, it's I'd say it's worth a watch. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode. I have been the Social Solipsist, and I will see you guys next time.